There's usually a trip to the park in the evenings, and that's just downtime, right? That's just throwing the ball. What happens in those times where I can improve that is I'm often throwing the ball, thinking about what I didn't get done, what I need to do tomorrow. What am I actually getting done when I'm running the to-do list in the park? Nothing. I'm losing my time there, but I'm accomplishing nothing. Yes. So why not just leave it at home where I could actually accomplish things at a different time and be at the park and enjoy it?
That presence that we all crave, that's what you just described. I'm going to be, when I'm in the park, I'm going to be in the park. When I'm working, I'm going to be working. There's no value in running the to-do list. Welcome, my dear friend, Jennifer Sherwood, to Minding Your Minutes. I'm so appreciative that you agreed to be on this podcast, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you. Before I do, I want to just give everybody a little bit of an introduction about who you are, how we met. And so we've known each other for a couple of years now, what, 4, I guess?
Maybe even 5.
Yeah, it's been 5
Time is
years.
flying.
Yeah. And so, we danced around in as coach and client. I was your client initially. We met on a retreat, officially in person. You coached me. Since then, I've coached you. You've coached me. We've coached each other. We've been on retreat. And how I know you and how I refer people to you really is from a confidence perspective for women that are struggling with those thoughts they just can't get rid of, the overthinking. I think of you as the stop shooting on yourself person. So when people are really stuck in that mindset of all of the things they're supposed to do that get in the way of what they actually want to do, that's who I think of as your people. And so you and I have some crossover, but we attract different audiences. And so I'm appreciative of you being here. So we both work with entrepreneurs. We both work with corporate professionals. We work with women in the world who are trying to make their way, moms who are in the corporate world. We also work with a few men here and there that wander into our sphere. Yeah. And so what I'd love for you to do initially is just, what have I left out? What are you other than a confidence coach and a mindset coach? Tell me more.
Oh boy. Okay. This is going to be fun. I knew this was going to be fun. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And I didn't miss the irony, by the way, of me saying time's flying while we're on a podcast called Minding Your Minutes. So I imagine that will make its way into this conversation. So thank you for having me. And it's so fun to think about how we got here too, this back and forth that we've done and the way we support each other. It's the whole reason I'm here, because I adore I adore the work you do. So let's do more of this together. What else am I beyond that in terms of my professional role? I would think also I'm the inner critic coach. So confidence and stop shooting. And I really love to work on what is that critical voice in your head telling you? What is the drive behind what you're doing? I don't think people recognize that their behavior, something has to be driving that, right? And a lot of people think it's the external circumstance. Well, I lashed out at so-and-so because they'd done this to me. No, because there are other times when people do that thing to you and you maybe have a calmer reaction. So it's more to do what's going on in your head, in your mind, in your body. And I like to help people figure that out.
Awesome. So I didn't use the word inner critic. And I certainly know that we were both trained in that way. So you and I also went through Martha Beck's coach training.
Yes, we did.
Times. And so that inner voice and that inner critic was very much part of that training. And I appreciate you bringing that in.
Yeah.
The reason for this podcast is really, and you mentioned it, that sense that time is flying by and we're not necessarily doing all the things, being all the things, kind of staying in the life that we want to be in because of that sense of not enough time, because of that inner critic. Yeah. And so what I noticed with my clients, and I don't know about you and your clients, but I noticed that what gets pushed to the side most of the time is our own well-being. And so my interest in having this conversation with successful coaches, with other women, with entrepreneurs, is really to understand, how do people take care of their own well-being in the midst of a successful, busy life? So we're going to shift sort of to that idea of well-being. And, knowing we've got this inner critic conversation that's going on in our heads, and knowing that you've got this time conversation. But what does the word, when you hear well-being, what does that even mean to you? Let's just start there.
It's so interesting when you ask that question, because so many things start to bubble up for me. And I almost find I can't give you like a definition, but as I think about this, I think about the way we grew up. And I think when we were kids, the discussion of, unless you were a hippie, right? I actually live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm 15 minutes from Berkeley. So there was like, in my growing up, there were like the hippies and the rest of us. Although I'm much more in the woo-woo hippie world now, hippie, I'll say with air quotes. But growing up, I think the way discussions of health happened around in my life, in my world, it was, an apple a day keeps the doctor away was sort of the thing, or, eat your 3 square meals. And that was pretty much it. And it was sort of about like doing the basic necessities, but there wasn't any real conversation beyond that. And it certainly didn't include emotional well-being. So when I think of well-being, what comes to mind is wholeness. And so it's thinking about being well in all of the areas of my life. And for me in particular, and I think the women who are attracted to me and you as well, or the clients who are, my clients tend to be on overdrive. So the mind spin, I know when I'm out of sync because I'm spinning. And as my friend and my coach, you know that about me as well. When I am spinning, I am out of sync. I am not taking care of myself. I'm not doing what I need to do. So well-being for me really is this, for those of you who are listening and can't see, I'm sort of making this circle with my hand. It's all about wholeness and every part. We talk about that expression, mind, body, spirit. It's all of it. So it's not just eating right. It's not just any one thing. It's the whole picture. And I think that's something I've come to realize or come to in the more recent past.
I love that you use that terminology, and I use that sense of wholeness. I'm making the same circle with my hands because that's the way that I was trained to look at a whole person, because it isn't just the physical health. So when you say all of those parts, that wholeness, tell me a little more about what that means to you. What does it look like day to day if you're whole?
Well, I would say I'm not there yet. So this is a work in progress. But when I think about the parts, and I may not even think to put them all out there, but I do think of physical health. So how am I eating? Am I getting exercise? Am I taking care of myself? Am I doing the things I need to do for myself? Mentally, how is my stress level? Where is my brain? Am I just in that spin cycle? And what do I do for myself around there? You and I have had lots of conversations about this, and mindfulness is a practice that, well, I want to be careful to use mindfulness as such a broad term. I'm pretty good about making the time to sit and do a mindfulness meditation almost every day. I can't claim that I'm mindful throughout my day. So that is, sort of part of the wholeness that I'm not quite there yet, but I'm catching myself more often. And so when I spin, when my brain is on overdrive, how can I come back to my body, my space where I am here and now? So what did I say? Physical health, mental health. I think also it's like the connections in my world. How connected am I to friends and family and the things that bring me a lot of joy? Am I making time for fun? That one falls to the wayside quite a bit. And then just making sure I'm not over giving. I have a tendency, as a lot of the people who probably are listening to this, I have a tendency to give well beyond what I'm capable of giving and run from sort of an empty tank. That's something I'm working on as well. So there's probably categories I'm missing, but those feel like the big ones: relationships, physical health, mental health, fun. And then how am I managing what I'm over giving?
Yeah. So there's a lot in there. And so I'm curious, you mentioned mindfulness and that it's still a work in progress. How are you using that in the middle of a Wednesday to say, whoa, I need to do something about my spin? How does it look in real life?
So in real life, in the middle of a Wednesday, when I have maybe a to-do list in front of me that's ridiculous, that no one can possibly do, and I'm starting, the inner critic is in the back of my mind about how am I going to get it all done? I'll never get it all done. When I notice it, this is the key, right? We have to notice it, is to stop. Just hold on, time out, take a breath. That's the most important thing I can do for myself. And then maybe sometimes the spin will start right back up, and then I have to come back again. But if I can give myself that pause to just hold on a second, no one's going to die if I don't finish my to-do list today. That's something I have to just remind myself of. It's not I can't think of what the terminology would be in some like law enforcement or maybe at NASA or something, it's not that code red. Really, my brain wants me to think it is, but the world is not going to stop if I don't do, social media for my business, even though my brain wants me to think that, oh my God, this is terrible. It's taking that breath and reminding myself, okay, hold on. Nothing catastrophic is going to happen if I don't get this thing done, and sort of bringing myself back that way to more of the reality of it. Because truthfully, if I try to attack that to-do list from that spin space, the content I turn out is not going to be as good, or my interactions with other people is going to be distracted. So yeah, it's really important for me to get back in my body and then make my choices or take the steps or prioritize from that place, not from my hair's on fire.
If I had a tail, I would wag it. I mean, I remember having those conversations several years ago about this disconnect almost from your body. And so it sounds like you're really using that practice to notice not just the critic, but how's my body feeling, and deliberately bringing yourself back. Like, oh, where am I? Yeah. So
I love that question. Where am I? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but where am I? Because for me, the mind spin, I'm like, I want to say 50 yards, but probably like 5,000 yards ahead of where I'm actually physically at.
Yeah. And I wonder if it sounds almost like you're using the inner critic as a marker for that, just that to notice. Is it a particular type of story that you notice? Is it a volume of story? What is it that triggers you to go, oh, here's a moment that I could be more mindful?
I think it's a type of story. It's I am prone to, I never have enough time. So it's interesting that we're on your podcast here talking about that. And generally speaking, it's when it's really far gone, that's when I'm on the full blown spin. But it's when I notice myself rushing, when I'm in the shower and I'm scrubbing really fast. And then I think, what am I like? Just hold on, take a second here. I can shave my legs in a reasonable amount of time without being like a maniac. That's when I start noticing it, like, oh, okay, hold on. So it's the rushing. If I'm walking from one end of my house to the other to get to a meeting and I'm like feeling like I have to go at a sprinter's pace, it's not going to make a hill of beans of difference really when I'm sort of running through the house versus let me take a breath. I'm going to get there, within a nanosecond of if I ran. But it's that feeling of rushing. That's what's really starting to grab my attention. So yes, and it's the inner critic who's starting to say, you're going to be late. Oh my God, you're not going to get there in time. You're not going to have enough time for this. It's critical of, oh, this is a moment. I hadn't realized this. Planning is not my forte. It's something that I'm working on as well. So I think the critic gets in there of like, you didn't give enough time. You didn't plan well enough. You didn't use your time well enough. I think that's what's behind all of that. So it's the rushing. And then when it's really beyond that, what I've noticed, it's that spin cycle in my brain.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's something about the pacing that's important to pay attention to. So, and you mentioned planning. It's something that you're working on. How are you planning, or how are you thinking about planning to keep yourself in your own schedule?
Yeah, that's a good question because it is a work in progress. What I have been playing with recently is I've tried out bullet journaling, and it really doesn't make any difference. I don't think for me what method I use. The thing about bullet journal though is it's always in front of me. So weekly, I dump everything out in my brain onto a list for the week. And then I'm just basically taking those things and plugging it into different days. If I don't get it done on that day, I move it to another day. But the thing I like about it is it's all contained in one place. So I may look back and go, oh, shoot, this thing didn't get plugged in. So I need to do that. That seems to have been helping to have it all sort of contained. And I'm just playing with how to actually make that work and make the best use of my time. I will tell you what the biggest time suck is for me is the spinning. It's that inner critic sucks out so much of my energy. It just takes up so much time. And then it's the typical, like, I'll go on social media because I think maybe there's something business-wise that comments that I want to respond to or things like that. And then I get lost in the rabbit hole. So 2 things really kind of taking up time that could be spent more wisely: the mind spin and then getting lost in social media.
Yeah. And I suspect that as you are aware of this, it also helps you to make your clients perhaps a little more mindful of the same
You
thing.
bet. Yeah. Oh yeah. I hear it when they start talking about it, like ding, ding, the radar.
Yeah, it's so funny how we do that. And so it sounds like you're putting some systems in place with the bullet journaling. And then you said you plug it in. You plug it into what? A paper planner, an Outlook calendar, a note on your phone. How do you track the plugged in part?
Mostly right now, it's just all in the bullet journal. So
okay.
There's a weekly dump that I do. And then there's a page for each day of the week where I literally write the tasks that are going to happen that day. And either they get crossed off or they get a symbol on them that says, move it to tomorrow. And then it's, I look back at what I did, and then I need to go back and look at the initial dump and say, did I do everything on here? If not, move it to next week. So it's planning in that way.
And does that also include your own? So business, yes. Does this include you as well?
Okay, Brigette. Way
I'm
to call me out. So it does include personal to-do items. So this system has been all for items. The planning of taking care of myself, I think, is where you were going with this. I don't write it down. However, I will say I am very good about, I have a morning routine and I am good about sticking to it. So there's meditation time, there's journal time, and then there's either walking my dogs or getting on my spin or getting on a spin class. So I'm actually pretty committed to those things. So I don't necessarily need them for me. I don't need them in the journal. What I could use in the journal is more fun and girlfriend time.
So we're aware of the opportunities for the things that you mentioned that are part of well-being beyond just the physical health. So it sounds like you've got the mind and the physical covered because it's part of your morning routine. And so as you're thinking about the girlfriend time and the intentional connection time, what are you envisioning for that?
I think like just being more intentional about, for example, I have a good friend literally lives down the street from me. And we keep saying in Berkeley, there's a street that gets all decorated for the holidays. And we kept saying, oh, we need to go there and have a drink and catch up. Didn't happen. So I need to make sure I put these things, pick a date. This whole sort of obtuse, we should get together needs to stop because nothing ever happens. I heard Tim Ferriss say, nothing is real until it's on the calendar. And so I think that's going to be my thing for 2023 is instead of saying, oh yeah, let's do that. Okay, pull out your phone and let's pick a date. And then if we have to change that, that's fine. But I want it on the calendar. Yeah. So I can see more, just more one-on-one time with my friends. I actually went to a party the other night and I haven't seen friends in a while between being busy. And then my husband and I had COVID. And so we've just been away from our friends a lot and literally walking in the room. And I was hugging one of my girlfriends and I said, don't move because I'm going to stand here a little bit longer. Like I'm going to hug you longer. And I don't want that kind of time to go away again. So time with individual friends and times with groups of friends too.
Yeah. So that sounds like a theme for 2023 that's important. And so if I were looking at that from a well-being perspective, I would call that intentional connection. Just because that's the words that resonate with me, the phrase that resonates with me. If I were looking at it from a lifestyle medicine perspective, it would be called social connection, which is one of the huge determinants of health.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you bring that up. It's like something's missing here. And you mentioned COVID. I mean, it's something that's missing for a lot of us, all of us, because we're out of practice.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And I think you found this with your clients as well. My clients have been saying, as adults, it's really hard to make and maintain friendships. And so prior to COVID, they were already feeling lonely and they didn't know how to connect with people. And I'm no different than my clients, right? I just have some tools that maybe they don't have. But I was sort of feeling that way before the pandemic as well. And then all the shutdown. And then even today, there are a lot of us that are still nervous about it. And so maybe not going out the way that we used to. So yeah, getting really intentional about how can we create time that feels good to us, that feels relatively safe, right? There's no safe way to do it. But if you're someone who has concerns about that, but what was the thing that the research that came out that said loneliness is as dangerous as smoking to your health?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a balance of figuring that out and reaching out to find people that you actually want to spend time with and doing it instead of staying in our kind of shells. I think for a lot of people, there's some issues with self-confidence in there about being accepted, being liked, whatever is going on. And yet there's such a benefit to those connections. For me personally, it was worth working through those things to have more real connections in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like there has been some intentionality of how could I expand my circle and still feel safe? It's safe from a health perspective.
Yeah. And I want to be really honest with the people who are listening, because I don't know what state people are in. Years before I discovered coaching, before I discovered really becoming intentional and working on my thoughts, I had a lot of self-doubt and a lot of inner critic. And so being social used to be very hard for me. I would spend a lot of time worrying about what people thought, worrying about being judged. And so I would get around groups of people and I would be exhausted from all of that. So I didn't stay very long and I didn't enjoy it, because who's going to enjoy that when you've got a dictator in your mind, with the megaphone screaming at you? And I was keenly aware when I went to this group gathering the other day, because a lot of the people there are the same folks that I was seeing before. These are friends that we met through our kids, and our kids are all grown now. So this is a long span of time. But I walked in the door and I was doing that. I was hugging people for a long time and I was excited to go. And I came home feeling so happy to have been with them. And it was such a stark contrast for me when I looked back. What year is it now? Maybe 10, 15 years ago. I don't know how long ago, and what a distinct difference. And that's because of all the work I've done and all the I want to share this for people who are maybe still on that other side of I don't want to go. It's exhausting. It drains me. I don't enjoy it. I hear you. Yes. And we need that kind of social connection. So I want people to have hope instead of feeling hopeless. Who in your life do you feel okay around now or comfortable around now? And start there.
Right.
And build more of that.
And it, and if going in person is too much of a lift right now, then you can connect like you and I are connecting virtually.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a big group of people. For the introverts in the listening pool, they're like, oh no, this is not my jam. Social connection can be one person with whom you feel safe. And it can be 100%. At the end of a telephone. It can be on a Zoom connection like we're on. It could be, and it can be fleeting. It doesn't have to be this deep emotional connection to be health enhancing or well-being enhancing. It can simply be meeting someone's eyes in the line to get coffee. I mean, it's just a moment of human connection. So our nervous systems respond to each other. So it doesn't even really have to be this meaningful thing. It's enough to be seen and acknowledged.
I love that. And I just want to say too, you and I have been friends for, we can't decide, 4 or 5 years here. And we've literally been in person together 3 times over that entire time. And yet I, to anyone listening, I consider Brigette to be one of my closest friends. She probably knows me, as authentically as anybody. And this is how we do it most of the time, Zoom or phone. We live in different parts of the country and yet I gained so much from being with you. So yeah, I think talking about the Zoom, and then yes, that moment of human connection in the line for coffee or things like that. Or another thing I think laughter is just so important. So, who in your life can you just laugh with? It's again, we don't necessarily have to have deep, meaningful conversations every time we get together, although that's my jam. That's what I love. But I also love just like that fun connection too. I think laughter is so important.
Yeah, it is. I mean, even just from a stress hormone perspective, laughter is the opposite of stress hormone.
Oh, I love
laughter
that.
releases all the good, juicy stuff. So, if you want to get all scientific-y, it works. There's a reason that people feel better after they laugh. And it's driven by the chemical release. And so you mentioned a couple of times there's laughter, and then you mentioned play and that you were still working on that.
Yeah.
What's the working on that part? What does it look like?
I think it's making time for it, and then also figuring out what is play for me. I'm a pretty goofy person by nature. As you know, I love to stand up paddleboard. There's nothing really goofy about stand up paddleboarding, but like that is really fun for me. It's spiritual. Getting out on the water by myself is just listening to the oar hitting the water over and over. That's really spiritual. If I go with somebody else, it can be really fun to have that experience together. I never do this. I went shopping. I don't like to shop, but I went shopping the other day with a girlfriend for the first time. I don't remember the last one. And we just walked in and out of some stores, and we were just kind of giggling at some of the stuff that's out there. And I don't know, that was fun and playful. And so for me, figuring out how to be a little bit lighter in my life, I am very much about deep conversations and serious topics. I want to help people transform their lives. And I need that balance of fun and playful as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And play and fun is actually transformative. And we forget that as adults.
Yeah.
And so you and I started this conversation before we actually started the conversation. And one of the things that you said, just for our listeners, is what is this spirit thing? How do you think about spirit as a component of well-being? And I said, oh, no, we're going to talk about that later. And you mentioned it, that paddleboarding is spiritual.
Oh, yeah.
So it's engaging your spirit. What else is engaging to your spirit?
Oh, that is a good question. Yeah. People listening, no joke. She wouldn't answer my question until we hit.
I'm going to. Maybe.
That is such a good, what else is spiritual for me? I feel this connection. So when I think about paddling, I feel this connection somehow. I'm not a religious person per se. But there is almost that feeling of being one with something. Anything water can do. Water is a really big draw for me. So even just going and sitting by the water, there's just some connection there. And then I think getting just nature. I'm fascinated by being out in nature. My husband and I took this incredible road trip this year when we were out in the desert, which is a totally different environment for us. And being out there, it's like when I feel like being in awe of what's around me, of what nature has created. Where I live, I'm in the Bay Area. I think I said that, there's just these beautiful trees and redwoods and the bay. I can see the bay from the town I live in. So I'll be driving along the freeway and I get this gift of being able to see the bay and being able to see the skyline of San Francisco. And I think nature really does that for me as well.
Yeah. And so you pretty well summed up the experience of a spiritual connection is that sense of awe, however you get it. Because some people find it in a cathedral or in a religious service, and that's where they connect with that sense of connection with something bigger than themselves. Other people connect with it in nature. Other people connect with it through play or creativity. And it doesn't really matter. And that's what I love about that question is like, there's not a right answer.
Yeah.
And so I tend to use the word spirit instead of spiritual because some people have religious trauma that might like, I don't do that. Like, no. Yeah. And other people that's a big part of their life. And so there's not really a right or wrong there. There is if you connect to something bigger than yourself, that is absolutely healing and part of well-being, if we look at it through that lens. But there are lots of different ways to get there. And I suspect, but you didn't say, that sometimes you touch it in a mindfulness practice.
I would think so. It just wasn't the thing that came to mind particularly. I feel like right now, as I'm embarking into this mindfulness journey, that most of my mindfulness practice is spent between, I'm out in thoughts, let me come back. I'm out in thoughts, let me come back. So I think I'm working on training my brain to be, in the mindful space. And I do wonder, as I practice that more, if that spirituality will come more as I stay in that space more than what's on my shopping list today.
Yeah, which I'm really glad you said that, because that's the reality. And when you notice you're making a shopping list and you come back, that's actually mindfulness.
Right? Exactly.
Congratulations, you did it.
Until I had done my certification in mindfulness training, I used to just get frustrated with myself and think that I was no good at it. And then it was in that training. And honestly, Brigette, you had probably said it to me before, but it was in that training where one of the instructors said, when you notice it, congratulate yourself, because that's actually mindfulness. And I was like, oh, so I could let go of being critical of myself about not being able to stay out of my thoughts, because no one can. That's just our normal human brain. It's meant to produce thoughts. It produces thoughts, And so instead of feeling like I'm no good at this and giving up, going, oh gosh, okay, that's okay. I'm coming back. That's mindfulness. Pat on the back.
Yeah. We try to drop the striving, but yes, you're right. Like, give yourself a tiny little pat on the back and say, oh, well, look what I just did. With
I noticed it.
And kindness, right?
Yes.
So you mentioned something that I think is important for everyone to hear too. At one point, it sounds like you were really avoiding some social connections because there was a lack of confidence, or there was some inner critic. How was that impacting your overall well-being? Think back to that time.
I was very overwhelmed. And the way that showed up was I was pretty short with my kids, my husband, I think I was just, I feel like if we have, reserves of being able to manage things, my reserve was very small. So everything could set me off into a shame spiral, into a perfectionist, like just critic extravaganza. And so I think I was just always on alert for fear that I wouldn't look like I had it all together, that I would be judged. I think I lived in a space of assuming everybody else had everything together and I didn't. And that was a really hard place to come from. To be honest, it makes me sad when I look back on the impact on my family and the lack of enjoyment of a life that I had, the life I wanted. I just wasn't in it and I wasn't enjoying it. And that's what makes me sad when I look back. I wish I had understood back then when my kids were young, how normal I was and been able to just give myself a break and just be with them and enjoy the messiness of life. But I just had this perfectionist in me that couldn't. And so it really impacted my relationship. My kids and I have a great relationship. I don't know how we met. I mean, I wasn't a horrible mom. I don't want it to sound like that, but I just wish I could have been less critical of myself and then more engaged with them and my husband and my family and my friends, all of that. But I was so withdrawn because I was so critical and scared all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, thank you for acknowledging that, because I know we're at an age where we can look back and say, oh, wow, I'm so glad I'm on the other side of that. Yeah. But as you think back to that, what were the 2 or 3 things that made the biggest difference that allowed you to start unraveling that critical voice?
I don't know if you should, if it really, these two could lump together, but it was therapy and coaching. It really was, I started off in therapy, really dealing with some childhood stuff that, listen, you don't want to look at it, but it has to be looked at, like it has to be dealt with. So that was the first step, was going to therapy and really dealing with some childhood stuff. And then moving into coaching. And it was ironic. The whole reason I hired a coach was because I was burnt out in my career. And I'm an audiologist by training and by experience. And for me, that degree felt very, very narrow. So if I was going to burn out in that, what else was I going to do professionally? I realize now there's loads of options, but that's how it felt. But what I loved about, I worked for the Department of Health as a consultant. I wasn't a clinical person anymore. What I loved about my job was writing, teaching, speaking. And all of a sudden coaching kind of came into my awareness. And I thought, oh, coaching, I could still be helping people. I could do these 3 things that I love. I should hire a coach and see what it's like. And I was just transitioning out of therapy, went into coaching, and it totally rocked my world. She was the first person, my therapist may have said it and I didn't hear it, but for me, she was the first person to help me see that those critical thoughts were what was causing me to feel lousy. It wasn't that I had 2 young kids and nothing was perfect. And it wasn't the circumstance I was in, it was what I was thinking. So those 2 things really made the difference for me to start shifting all of that, to recognize that I had choices that I didn't think were in front of me. I was very black and white about what my role was in my life and who I was and how it was going to go. And oh my God, it doesn't have to be that way. I don't have to be a martyr. I don't have to be a victim. I can make choices. And that is so liberating, so mind-blowing, and still to this day, working on that, right? I think that's going to be a constant lifelong learning and growing is, seeing what I'm doing on one day and going, oh crap, really? That's what I'm telling myself? All right, time to shift out of that. But now it happens very quickly. Whereas back then it was a big effort to change the thoughts. But I think those 2 things had the biggest impact. And then most recently, I would say adding in the mindfulness piece.
Yeah, because that's the speed part of recognizing it more quickly.
Yeah.
So that you can pull out the tools out of your toolkit that you've developed over these years of learning. And I really appreciate that combination of, and I'm going to call it mindfulness-based well-being or mindfulness-based inner critic work, because you're noticing, and really, it sounds like you're asking yourself a question: how do I need to shift in this moment? And how do my thoughts need to shift?
Yeah.
What
am I telling myself?
Yeah. So tell me more about how you work with your people in this regard. Your work is being shaped by this mindfulness practice. What do you have going on?
Yeah. So people I work with tend to be a lot like who I was, really in that inner critic, in that spin, like overthinking. I overthought everything, over worriers. And so I really help them try to slow down, because in order to, if we're going on this mindset work, if this is what's driving our confidence or lack thereof, you have to be able to slow down enough to hear what's going on. And so that's a big piece, is like really getting people to slow down. And then let's see what's behind all of this fear, lack of confidence, lack of feeling good enough. What's behind it, and start to shift it. And it's a lot of just old beliefs that, for people who don't understand this, a belief is literally, this is so mind-blowing the first time you hear it. A belief is literally just a thought you've had over and over and over until you decide it's true. And the best example I can give is people used to think the world was flat. It didn't make it true, right? They just said it enough that it was a belief that got passed on. It's no different for these critical thoughts that we think. It's just something we've internalized. And there's a lot of societal beliefs that we've internalized, particularly as women, about our worth and our value. And so I got to go back to your original question. I help my clients see that, and I help them see that it's nobody's fault. We're not about finding fault.
Right.
So society, okay, well, we can blame the patriarchy. I'm fine with that. But, really just coming into, what is it that you're telling yourself? What is it that you're operating from? How can we shift that into a way that's actually supportive of you? Interestingly enough, I literally just got off a call with a client. And I'll just share this because it's such a poignant example. She had a difficult conversation with a new boss and did not realize how much that shook her confidence. So she withdrew after the conversation, and now she's having trouble with communicating with him. Well, of course she is, because she shuts down every time she goes to talk to him. And she just didn't put 2 and 2 together. That's what we're here for, is to help clients see those situations. And so I really try to help clients see what's behind the behavior, what's behind the feeling, and shift that. And a lot of times, as you know, our bodies know that before our mind catches up. So For me, the spin cycle, that's really what comes up for me. It really feels like I'm just whirling, and that's what I recognize well before I notice the thoughts. It's like, oh my God, I'm in full blown spin. And so I help clients see, what is it? What does it feel like when you feel tense in this one spot? Sometimes when the other sign for me is there's chest response, like I can heat up here. If I notice that, or if a client notices whatever their specific thing is, maybe it is, I have one client who really gets a clench in her gut really twists up. Stop. What's behind that? Let's pull it apart. Let's examine it. That's the word I want. So I think I answered your question and maybe gave you way more than you asked for.
You totally did, because we're sort of dancing around this mind, body, spirit connection. And that's exactly what you're describing. The thought beneath, the emotion beneath is driving that body and that spirit response. We're all one being.
Right.
And so we try to think our way out of the box, and it's not what we are. We're not just thinking organisms, and it makes it hard. We think I'm going to think about this and it's going to all be fine. Like, yeah, it's not. I'm going to experience my way through, and I'm going to think some things, and I'm going to feel some things, but it's all connected as part of a well organism.
Yeah. Well, if it's your thoughts that are leading you to this feeling, this behavior, this action that you don't like, it's really hard to think your way out of it.
You can't. Yeah. And so you actually have to change the thought pattern. You have to choose a different action and behavior. So ultimately your body has to come along.
We can't separate those two. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we, at least the way that I'm trained, I can't separate from the body. So we were at a retreat together recently.
Yes.
And I know you had a retreat so you were at my retreat recently. You had your own retreat in November. And so there's probably some crossover between those retreats. I would love to know what you're bringing forward for your own well-being from those retreat experiences.
Oh, this is such an easy answer. But first, I have to tell you before I answer your question, in terms of fun, how to have fun. So we were taking a walk the other day, my husband and I, and there's a winter break camp going on for some kids locally. And I looked at him, I said, oh my gosh, that's so fun. I want to go to camp. And he said, you just did in Little Rock, which was your retreat. And it was fun. And there was some serious work there. But I think the thing I took away from your retreat in particular, my retreat, I was looking at it more from the participant perspective. But what I found for my own well-being from that is I need to schedule rest. And so that was one takeaway for me. I love, love, love leading retreats, like so much. And it's a big carry. It's a big lift to hold space for people for multiple days. And I really need to schedule more rest time. I would have loved, in hindsight, to just have stayed in the place where I did the retreat, just stay there with a blanket and a book for like 2 days afterwards and do absolutely nothing. So for future, from your retreat, what I took away from it was you did this beautiful teaching around polyvagal theory and fight, flight, freeze, fawn, which is new. And I really resonate with that. And so for me, what I was taking away is how much I fawn. And so for people who aren't familiar with that, it's like really trying to take care of other people because there's a fear of not fitting in, not being liked, not being, whatever the fears are. Those responses are fear-based. And for me, I want to take care of everybody and make sure everybody's good. And I'm done with that. I'm not done with that. I mean, it is a strength of mine, actually, that I'm able to make people feel comfortable. And I am a natural peacemaker, but I'm done fawning that on people. I'm done with that. I'm done with that stress response.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like the over giving over it part.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah. I recognize that that's a chance for me to step back and let them have their own experience. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. I love that you talked about scheduling rest and renewal for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that come into a Wednesday?
It doesn't. To be honest, right now it doesn't. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I mean, I do take time in the mornings, which is renewal time. I have these 2 dogs who need to get out every single day. So there's usually a trip to the park in the evenings, and that's just downtime, right? That's just throwing the ball. What happens in those times where I can improve that is I'm often throwing the ball, thinking about what I didn't get done, what I need to do tomorrow. What would be better is if I just left that in the bullet journal and trusted myself to get to it the next day and just was present in the park and just enjoyed. The thing about nature and animals, my dogs, I think all dogs are probably like this, but my dog they're just joy embodied. And if I just let myself be with them, I can actually become more joyful around them, right? Like take on their characteristics. So moving forward, I think being mindful and present in the moment with them and their energy could be that rest and renew that I need on a Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah. And it sounds a little bit like play.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
I have been known to get on the playground equipment when I'm there. I did get on there's actually still a seesaw teeter-totter at this park. I thought they were banned. So my husband and I got on it and I couldn't stop. Like I was laughing so hard, I thought I was going to pee my pants, kind of like joyful. And so there needs to be more of that in those moments too.
Yeah. And so there's a bit of recognition that I'm probably already doing it and it's paying attention to it instead of making the to-do list.
Yes. Yes. And that's true for so many areas of our life, just being where we are, because the damn to-do list is so magnetic. It really draws us. And yet okay, here's something for your listeners to ponder. And this is what I've been thinking about. What am I actually getting done when I'm running the to-do list in the park? Nothing. I'm losing my time there, but I'm accomplishing nothing. Yes. So why not just leave it at home where I could actually accomplish things at a different time and be at the park and enjoy it?
Mic drop. Yeah, absolutely. Because that presence that we all crave, that's what you just described. When I'm in the park, I'm going to be in the park. When I'm working, I'm going to be working. There's no value in running the to-do list.
There really isn't. Tonight's park visit is going to be so much better.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah. So carry it forward.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. And so for anybody that's listening, I would love for you to talk about what you have coming up that supports women in this journey to, what are your words? It's not dismantle the inner critic, but befriend the inner critic.
Yeah, I think that makes
with
sense.
The inner critic. Tell me what it is.
It's funny. I'm having a total mind blank. You know how that works, but I really help women to create a life they love. Because when you're under the critic, you don't love it. And I want them to be able to have life on their terms, not what society expects of them, not what their spouse expects, not what their boss expects. Like, I want them to have the life on their terms. When I think back, I said I had the life I wanted and I didn't enjoy it. And that's because I was so caught up in what I thought I should be doing. So I help women stop shoulding on themselves and create a life they love. And I do this in a couple of ways. One-on-one coaching is primary. Lots of headway can be made in one-on-one coaching. I do retreats, as you mentioned, which I was just texting with a woman who came to my last retreat, and she was a unicorn. She didn't know me at all. A friend brought her, and she just sent me a note yesterday and said her life, someone at the retreat who's been at my retreats before said retreats can be literally life-changing, which I believe as well. Of course, this woman walks in and she's skeptical, right? Because she doesn't know. And she said, it was literally life-changing. So a weekend retreat can make a huge difference. That's one way that I work. The other way that I work is I run a group membership program called the GC. And the GC is really about girlfriends and collaboration. When I hear women say it's hard to make friends, this is what I wanted to create. So it's community. It's a place to get coached. And I always say what I love the GC so much. The women who are in there are just warm and open and non-judgmental. This is a big piece. I lay ground rules as to how this group works. We're not there to judge each other. We're not there to give each other advice or should on one another. We're there to listen, support, and give feedback. And so I love to say it is the warmest, safest corner on the internet. It's virtual program. I want to encourage, and some people aren't ready for one-on-one coaching. That feels like too big of a step. The GC is a monthly membership. Join whenever you want, leave whenever you want. There's no commitment, but it's a place to really make real connections. I always have a tool once a month. There's a tool that I bring in to help create boundaries, to have the life you want, to start saying no, that sort of thing. And then we also have a call where it's just open discussion and coaching. And so you can get coached. You can learn a ton by watching other people get coached. And it's just like this amazing, I can't emphasize enough the connections in there, the genuine, real connections that women are making that have created friendships outside of the group. So that's what I'm really excited about right now. Probably the GC is the thing that I would say I'm most excited about. Just watching it grow and watching those women come together has been so beautiful for me.
Cool. Yeah. And I have the benefit of knowing some of the women and also knowing some of the tools you introduced. So I would highly encourage anybody listening to this to check it out. How can they find you?
Oh, thank you. So my website is jennifersherwood.com. On all the socials, I'm Jennifer Sherwood Coaching. So you can find me Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And if you go to my website, there are links to everything there. So jennifersherwood.com might be the portal to navigate to everything else.
Awesome. And I really appreciate your time. I have one final question.
Okay, I'm ready.
So what is your one well-being? You can call it a goal. You can call it an intention for 2023.
I'm going to say more fun.
No, cool.
Yeah, I think that's really it. More fun. Awesome. I think that's the piece that has really been shortchanged, if you will. I have not been making the time for that. And I think rest and renewal will come with more fun.
Awesome. Yeah. The contrast between the two, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, you are so welcome.
I really appreciate it. And I know that anyone listening is going to get so much benefit from your wisdom and your sense of fun that shines through in every conversation. So
you mean the giant goofball that I am?
Yeah, that one. The one that's just like your dogs.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And this has been a pleasure, Brigette. I will go anywhere, do anything that you ask me to do. So I'm in for it.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon, and we will launch this soon.
Fabulous.
Thank you for everyone listening.